Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Great. Well, I'm glad there's so many of you, especially that we had some after party yesterday, as far as I know. Is there anyone with hangover here? Too shy to say. Okay. So, welcome. My name is Iga. I'm a user experience designer. I'm also a researcher. And for the past couple of years, I was running a successful user experience studio. Currently, I help organizations in creating their own in-house user experience teams, establishing the right processes, the right good practices. And in doing so, I do it not just by trainings, but also through mentoring sessions, through consults. And what I've noticed is that the thing that needs most convincing is the role of user research in the design process, in the development process. So this is what I would like to talk to you about today. But before I start, let's start with a question. I can barely see you through the lights, but hopefully I'll be able to see what's happening there. Let's start with the first question. How many of you are involved in creating a product that is used by people? You, your team, okay? Definitely most of you raised your hands. So now that we've established that, I have another question. How many of you have actually seen your users using the product, but see it with your own eyes in person? Okay, it's around, I would say, 20 to 30% of you that raised their hands. So most people didn't raise their hand. So hopefully my talk will inspire you to change that, so that the next time I ask you this question, most of you raise their hands, okay? And I'll start with a story. It's a story about a mountain. It's a real story that happened on the job. It's a story that stuck to my mind. It also became a starting point of my book about user research. I had a client once. He was a very energetic entrepreneur, ex-developer. He was also a founder of a startup that was about training developers. He had this idea that developers need challenges, that they need to feel that they are progressing in their career. So he wanted to change the way they learn new languages and technologies. Okay, I think the feeling that developers need challenges is a bit optimistic, but let's say it's true. Anyway, he invited me to join his team and help him with the website he created. This website was for selling the trainings he created for developers. He already got a design, so I was there more to revamp the design, make it better, because he didn't like it, he didn't think it was right. So first I learned everything about the business, what he was trying to do and trying to achieve, and then I looked at the design, the design he had. And there it was, a mountain, right there in the middle of a website, huge, very beautiful mountain, taking around 2/3 of a page. So I'm asking my client, politely as possible, what's up with this mountain? And he's telling me, well, turns out this is the reflection of the challenge that developers are undertaking to progress in their career. They are trying to reach the top of the mountain, the top of their developing capabilities. So I'm trying to be as polite as possible, and I'm asking, don't you think it might be just a teeny tiny bit confusing, that maybe they will not get it? But my client is very confident. He's a confident person, and he strongly believes that developers are smart, they will get the metaphor, and they will understand it. And you know what? Who am I to say that developers aren't smart enough, right? What I did manage to do, though, is I managed to convince him to do usability tests with users. So we took a very lean approach. We did a couple of usability testings with developers. My client was involved in every step of the process. He was an observer to every single test. The study consisted of 2 parts. At the beginning, we did 5-second test, and then there was a classical task-based usability test. So let's hold for a minute for those of you who haven't heard about 5-second tests. What are they? It is a very quick and handy research method. It can be used to test not only websites, also mobile apps or any other software, even brand commercials. The idea that lies behind it is that people, they look at the product and within a couple of seconds they make up their mind if this is what they were looking for, if this is what they are interested in. And if not, they leave. So the test starts with showing the user, for example, a web page for around 5 seconds. Then we close the website and we ask the user a couple of questions. There can be different questions you may ask, but one of the more popular probably would be, first of all, what is the purpose of the website according to the user, and what are the things most memorable, things he remembered, he noticed. It's also good to give some context for the user before he sees the website. So in our case, our users got a letter. It was a promoting letter, kind of a leaflet, promoting the trainings. And right in their leaflet, there was an URL to the website we wanted to test. So we asked users to go to the website, look at it for 5 seconds, and then we asked those 2 questions. 5-second tests are a great tool to find out whether people understand your business, if they understand it right, and if they understand it quick. Because if they don't understand it fast, then probably they will not be interested, to give you their precious time and try to understand it. So they will just leave. But they're also great for finding out what was noticed, what was eye-catching. So I like to call this method a guerrilla eye tracking. It's a bit of overstatement, but it's to the point. So what do you think we got from these studies? At first usability test, actually the developer got it right. He got the metaphor. My client was very happy, obviously. He was wishing to bet on the results. So we kept the score. 5 more usability tests, and none of the users got it right. What do you think they thought about the website? What was the purpose of the website? Travel? Any other ideas? Yeah. The most popular answers were tracking trips, tracking tools, things like tents, sportswear, survival trips, anything around tracking trips. And the first time my client had tracking trips, he was like, what a stupid user. And I mean, probably most of you know the feeling, right? You've felt it at least once. But you know what? At the end of the study, when the last user test ended, he grabbed his cell phone. We didn't even do any interpretation. He just grabbed his phone, he called his co-founder, and he truly shouted into the phone, we're getting rid of the mountain has to go. And I like this story a lot because, well, first of all, I know you must be thinking, what on earth was he thinking? I mean, how on earth could he think that the mountain would work? I mean, it sounds ridiculous. But the problem is that we all do this kind of assumptions. We all think that we are right, and sometimes we are wrong. And I like this story a lot because it perfectly shows how a confident person may change his or her mind once he sees the real users. And it's a power that none of user experience consultants possess, because it's very easy to ignore expert. It's very easy to ignore the specialists. It's much more difficult to ignore a bunch of real users, especially if you've seen them with your own eyes. Sorry. And you have to also remember that designers, the experts, you're probably paying them, right? You're their client or their boss. So they try to be diplomatic, they try to be polite, and users don't. They tend to be very blunt, they use vivid terms, and you maybe even hear some swearing. So I'm standing here trying to show you that you can benefit from research, but I will not tell you that you need to do research in order to be successful, because that would be a bit of a lie. But what I'm trying to show you is that through user research, you can minimize the risks of your business. You can learn, get inspiration, learn about your users, their needs, and therefore make a product that fits these needs, right? So doing research helps you to be successful. Because none of the founders, none of the developers, none of the designers even are omnipotent. And this conviction can be found in virtually every design process you can find, regardless if you call it design thinking, user-centered design, human-centered design, lean startup. Every single one of these processes put user in the center, and they assume that you will be doing multiple user research. All of these methodologies highlight how important it is to observe your users, to make assumptions that are rooted in these observations, and then validate it, so that your idea of a product is actually true and tested. And also, in the later phase, when you already have some kind of design, when you already make some kind of decisions, all of these processes assume that you may be making some kind of mistakes, so you need to test it with real users to find out what is wrong, what can be done better. And believe me, there's always something that can be done better. And yet, I've seen countless companies, startups, even huge corporations who supposedly have money, that when they are faced with tight deadlines or budget, the first thing that goes is user research. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough time. Actually, I believe that time is the worst enemy of user research, not the money, time. But you know what? The same goes for thinking. If you want to do something right, you need the time to think about it, don't you? You need the time to gather data, to gather information, and make a data-informed decision. And this is what user research is for. Because what you don't have time is making the wrong solutions for the wrong reasons. Recently, Jared Spool gave a fabulous speech. He talked about 3 stages of market: technology-focused, feature-focused, and experience-focused. I will take mobiles as an example, as we are on Mobiconf. So let's talk about technology phase. At this stage, the first mobile was Motorola. It was huge, it was heavy, it barely worked, and to top that, it cost around $2,500. And yet, people desired it. They wanted to have it. It was fresh, it was new, it was something exciting. This was the technology stage. Solely engineer-focused. The designers aren't even in the picture yet. But then a competitor arises, and the market shifts and changes, This is when a cold war of features begins. This is the time when you create a table with your name or a product's name on it, and your competitors. You have a list of features, and there's everywhere tick and cross. Yes, yes, no, etc. But at some point, putting more features into the product not only becomes harder and harder, but it also affects the experience users have, and not in a good way. It's like having all those features you wish you didn't have, because most of them you don't even use at all. And then the market shifts again. This is when some new player arises, and he changes the perspective. He creates a new value, a value that didn't exist before. He makes a difference. iPhone, probably you're not surprised to hear it. iPhone, when it occurred, it was actually worse than Nokia at the time. It couldn't record a video. It couldn't send a picture with it. And yet, it changed the way we think about mobile phones. They're not just phones anymore. They're more like an extension of our lives, of our personality, right? Some of us even take them to bathroom, right? Which is quite an intimate experience. So this is the part where design becomes a huge success factor. It's not just about what feature to make, but it's about what is the right feature and how it affects the whole experience that we're looking for. And very often in this stage, in experience-focused, this is the time when you actually cut the features that you've added in the feature phase. So how do you know what to cut and what to design? There's a quote you probably all heard of. Personally, I heard it far too many times for my taste. It's a favorite quote of research skeptics, right along Steve Jobs' quote, which I will spare you this time. It's attributed to Henry Ford, who supposedly said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And the idea is that there's no point in asking users what they want. And you know what? I have to agree with it on one level. I mean, every researcher will tell you that you cannot ask users what they want, because they don't know that. They are not the designers. They don't know what can be done, they don't know what cannot be done, and they don't have the right imagination. What you can do, though, is you can ask about their problems, you can ask about their habits, their past experiences. You can also observe them performing the task that you are looking into, and look for the place for improvement. Because user research is definitely more about observation than it is about the opinions. And as for the opinions, let's look at the quote again. You know what? I don't think I would make a mutant horse based on that. But for me, it's a clear information that what people need is actually a faster means of transportation, right? Okay, so how can you learn about users through observations? Well, first of all, you cannot just sit around your office thinking, oh, what do they think, what do they do, what do they want, You gotta get out and meet the real users. Because what you have to remember is that you are not the user. And what is even more important, neither is your boss. So even if you are planning on using your own product, I've seen it happen very often in startups. Many startups create a product that they would like to use on their own. But even in this kind of situation, you are just one person. You have one set of beliefs, opinions, experiences, habits. So you gotta learn more about other people, because it's a very eye-opening experience. So the basic rule you should remember and try to incorporate in your work culture is GOOTB. Go out of the building. Leave your office. Go and meet your users in person. I'm also a very strong believer in having everyone on the team involved in the research and in the design, But it doesn't mean that everyone has to be a researcher. I mean, that would be pointless. But having your product manager, your developer, designer, observe the real users, it changes their perspective. It builds up the empathy, and it affects the way the product is developed. I was running a user experience company for around 6 years, and every time we did some kind of research for our client, or maybe a design workshop, anything that required the real users, we asked our clients to join us as observers, so they could actually see the people. And you know what? They absolutely loved it. They were always amazed. It was like, for them, it was like seeing a Santa Claus standing by the Christmas tree, you know. He's alive, he does exist, and he totally doesn't get our product. My favorite example of having your team involved in the research would probably be Airbnb. I don't know if you've heard about it, but every time Airbnb hires a new employee, this employee begins with a task. The task is to make a booking through Airbnb site and book a night at some kind of apartment. But it doesn't end here. It's not just about going through the process of booking a room. It's also about going out the office and actually living through the experience of staying at someone else's home. So every employee goes out, stays at someone's apartment, and he notes every single emotion, feeling, anything that comes to his mind, any ups and downs, any way he sees for an improvement. It's a way of, it's not just a nice night out, it's a research, it's a study. It's a way of enhancing your own product. And I believe that this kind of immersion in the product is very good for the whole team and for your customers as well, because now you can understand them better. Okay, so let's say you want to do some research. You want to learn about your users, their problems. What is the best method? How to do it? What is the best way to do it? I don't know if you've heard it, but there's one answer that is absolutely beloved by all user experience designers and researchers, and the answer is, it depends. And it works this time as well. It depends. There are so many different research methods you could use. Every single method has its own variations, and every variation can be tweaked and adjusted to the research problem. So, the possibilities are very vast. But in general, there are 4 stages in the development process, where you can benefit from the research. First, you can learn about your market, your user. This is in pre-idea phase. This is when you try to learn about your users. You're getting insights, inspirations. This is not about making design decisions yet. It's just about getting your creative juices going. So this is when you usually use some qualitative data, observations, rather than quantitative. But once you form a vision of your product, you want to make sure that this is the right direction that you are heading to. So you need to validate it. And this is when you use more quantitative data. You need the actual data to back up your vision, to back up your ideas. So this is the time when you probably use some surveys, some questionnaires, and other tools. And only then, when you are sure that you're heading the right direction, you're starting with the designs. You're putting your vision into the interface, into the solutions. But before you implement it, before you waste time on developing it, you should also test it with users to find out what can be done better. Is it user-friendly? Can people understand it? Maybe the language is wrong. What can be done better? This is when you usually use some kind of evaluation methods. probably the most popular would be usability testing. But not everything can be found in the prototype, so you should do a follow-up research as well on the version that is already launched with the users. There are more tools you can use at this time. For example, A/B tests, which I'm pretty sure most of you at least have heard of. It's a nice method that can help you make small changes to the design. It will not help you to make a completely different product, but it will help you to make small changes. Yet it's very helpful in meeting your target KPIs. So this is why it's loved by product owners. And of course, I don't have the time to talk you through all the methods, but I've chosen 5 that, in my opinion, are good for mobile contexts and can be used even without a ton of expertise. So let's start with observation. Observations are the best source of inspiration because they let you learn about what users do and not just what they think they do or they wish they did. Very often, you learn more through observation because people are not even aware of the things they're doing. They would be surprised at what they did. You can also learn more about the role of the environment, the distractors, so how the environment affects the interaction with your product. For example, my former company did ethnographic research for a power supplier, and they had this mobile form that it was required for the clients to fill out the form every now and then and provide the power consumption. And what you can barely see there in the photo, this is what it actually looked like. It's very dark in there, because the man that you can see there with his phone, this is the client, he was actually standing in his own wardrobe. Because what we decided to do, we decided that we will not do the research in the research lab, in our office. We will do it in people's homes. We wanted to see how they perform this task in their own environment. Turns out, not that comfortable. So this man was, he had his electricity meter in a wardrobe. As you can imagine, there was no light in there. So he had to get into his wardrobe. He had to enlighten the meter with his phone, memorize the number, go to the website on his mobile phone, provide the data, and send. And this is the kind of problem that we would not be able to see or to anticipate if we did the research in the lab. Cozy lab. For the sake of mobile experiences, another method that you could use that is not that popular, it's diaries. And it's actually what it sounds, my dear diary. Diaries let users note their emotions, opinions, the things they are doing, behaviors, right when they occur without the interference of a researcher. It's a good method for finding out about actions that are hard to plan ahead, that take place in different times and different places. Let's say, for example, reading magazines on tablets. This is the kind of thing that you can be doing on a bus, or waiting for a tram, or waiting for a lecture at the university, or even if the lecture is boring, you could read it on the lecture itself, or late at night in your own bed. And all of these situations would be very difficult for a researcher to participate in it, right? So you don't need any special tools to have the diary, to conduct the diary study. You can use a simple web form, even Google form. For example, we did it once for, we were trying to help a company who wanted to learn about learning patterns of pupils, of schoolboys and schoolgirls. And for around 2 weeks, schoolboys and schoolgirls were keeping a diary about their learning sessions. So each time they learned, they wrote us what were they learning, how, in what way, using what tools, etc. And it was fresh, you know, it was fresh, it wasn't distorted by the recollection of memories, and it wasn't also accidental, because they kept the diary for around 2 weeks, so we could see some patterns there. And a diary doesn't have to be through the form only, it doesn't have to be on a paper. It can be in the form of an audio recording or a video recording. And you know what? A good thing is that every single smartphone has an audio and video recording device, right? I would like to show you a video clip of such diary recordings. This is a study that my company did to learn about smart TVs and how people use smart TVs. What are the problems they are facing? What we learned, for example, is what were the reasons they turned the smart TVs on, or the issues they had with writing anything with remote control. And turns out it wasn't just the remote control that was difficult to use, it was also the incredible amount of different designs for keyboards. And people got lost in every single of these designs. And we learned about it all through experience, even though people were using their own smart TVs at their homes and we weren't there. But we had video recordings of their actions. Okay, so this was diaries. It doesn't have to be on paper. It looks fun, right? Watching it. So, research can be fun too. Okay, probably the favorite research method that gathers declaration is survey. And I'm pretty sure all of you have done at least one survey in their lifetime, right? I mean, it's easy to make, it's easy to gather data, and at the end you have a chart and percentages. I mean, who doesn't like numbers, right? And there are so many different tools you could use to make a nice-looking online survey. There's Survey Gizmo, for example, Google Forms. Some of them can actually let you do very nice-looking and even fun to fill out forms, for example, Typeform. But the problem with survey is that most of them are badly constructed, really badly constructed. They either ask the wrong question or they give you the right answer. So recently I've seen a startup in their early stage that was trying to validate their product idea. And one of the questions they asked was, would you rather buy cakes in a bakery or online? And I just looking at this question, you can easily get what is the kind of service that they're trying to build, right? What they're trying to do is, they're trying to do to cakes what Airbnb does to apartments. And you can easily guess what kind of answer they're hoping for, right? And when I see this question, there's so many other questions I have in my mind. Okay, I don't know how to answer this question because I've never in my life ordered a cake online. How big will be the offer? Will I be able to make some special order? What will the delivery look like? How long it will take? Would the cake get spoiled during the delivery? And what if the delivery guy, you know, smashes the cake on the street? What then? I mean, I don't know. There's so many questions I need an answers for before I answer this question. But there are just two answers here, you know? So very often through survey you can only validate what you want to validate, right? So you will get the answers you're looking for, but they will not be the right answers. They will not let you understand what people need. So if you're starting your journey with user research and you truly want to learn about users, I would rather suggest doing interviews in person. They take longer time, they are more difficult, but they will let you learn about your users things you wouldn't have imagined at all. And you don't have to meet your users personally. You can do it through Skype, Google Hangout, you know, even a phone. Once I had the opportunity of designing an interface, a product for salespeople in America. And believe me, salespeople in America are, you know, they are different species. They're not like Poles. So we had to learn about their needs and, for example, the language they were using or the processes they were following or the tools. But the budget, you know, there was no flight to USA planned in the budget for me, unfortunately. So I had to cope with this situation. And I ended up having multiple video conferences, having video recordings, and talking on the phones. And you know what? It wasn't perfect. I mean, it's 2016, and we still have issues with video conferencing, right? But I managed to learn about their job and managed to learn more about the tool they needed. So the main tool you need when you're doing interviews is a set of right questions, open questions. So you gotta ask people what, when, how, why, etc. And you need the ability to listen. You know, just shut your mouth and listen. Just ask questions. Don't share your ideas of a product. Don't pitch your ideas. Don't pitch your product. You should just listen. And once you make your design decisions, you can turn to evaluation methods like usability testing, which is probably the most popular method. And it makes a lot of sense because this is a wonderful tool. This is when you want to learn if people use your product the way it was intended. And they rarely do. Usability tests are also a great way to start your journey with research because they get people interested. And they always let you learn about you know, the things you can make better. They always provide vital data for improvements. What you have to remember, though, is that mobiles are very personal tools. So you cannot do a usability test with your own device. You have to ask users to bring their own smartphones, and you have to do the usability testing on their own phones. You can use, for example, Lookback.io. It's a very nice tool that will help you record both the user and the screen. It's still in development. However, it's free. So, you know, there's that. And some other tool you could use is Mr. Tappy. This is more for testing in research lab. This is an adjustable camera rig where you put your phone and you can record everything that happens on the screen. What you have to remember is that usability tests aren't demos. So you are not showing the users how to use the product. You're trying to learn if they can get it on their own, if they can use the product without you pitching the ideas. It usually requires user to perform a number of tasks. They should be embedded with in a history so people understand what is the purpose of the task, but you cannot give solutions. So one thing you have to remember is don't use the terms, the labels, for example, from your software. Because then people can easily find what you're asking them to find, and it doesn't mean it's user-friendly. And another thing, once again, this is the moment when a researcher should just shut up and listen. So every time a participant asks you a question, you very quickly get into a habit of answering the question with another question. So every time a user asks you, is this what we were looking for, or did I do it right? Should I do this? You ask them a question, and what do you think? Okay, so the question is, how can you make your research cheaper? Well, I'm glad that someone asked this question. There are many ways you can make them more affordable. For example, you can find the participants for the research on your own. Don't use a recruitment agency. First of all, they're quite expensive, but second of all, they're not that good. So try to find them on your own. Go out and look for the right people in some public spaces like airports, shopping malls, cafes. You know, these are the places where people have a lot of spare time, and they may be willing to share it with you. You can also look for participants through social media, and I find it a very effective way to look for people. Or also, especially if you work in a bigger company, you know, ask your coworkers if they can recommend their friends or their families, anyone that is not involved in the project itself, but they can participate in the research. But of course, you're looking for the right people, so you gotta make sure that the people you found meet your target group. Second tip, instead of paying your users a typical fee, because you should somehow show them that you appreciate their time, you could, for example, give them free access to the software you are testing. Or if you're testing e-commerce, you can provide them with a free delivery. Or if you're doing an interview in a cafe, you can pay for the meal and, you know, put it in the expenses of the company. Or you could also give them some promotional items like an umbrella or a notebook. I mean, you would be surprised how people enjoy this kind of junk. Choose your methods wisely. Some of them can be automated, can be very cheap. For example, click tracking. You should also always gather usage metrics, so you can learn about what tools people use, what features they use, in what order, in what patterns. This is the kind of information you can get on your own, you know, through your software, and they provide fabulous information for the future reference. You should also test early. That means testing hypotheses, validating the product idea, and also the early designs before you test the definite product. And I know it doesn't sound that it's cheaper. Probably at first it isn't, but it can save your company a lot of money, because you may find out that the solution you are trying to do doesn't make sense, is not needed at all. And if you find this kind of, you know, thing that very early turns out to be not needed, then try to estimate how much savings you did and show it to your supervisor. And also do smaller research, but more often. When you're with good organization skills, the recurring research becomes actually much cheaper. And also your team, they start to depend on the research. You know, they expect that everything will be tested, so it's also good for the product. So what if you want to do some research? You want to give it a try, but your company or your boss is not 100% sure. They're not on board yet. And the best advice anyone can give you is do it anyway, but start small. I mean, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than for permission, right? Start by writing down all the questions that your team has ever had about the design. You know, what were the issues they were having heated discussions about? What were the doubts? What were the differences of opinions? Write down all of these questions, these issues, and then try to figure out which one of them are potentially, they can make the biggest difference in revenue. For example, make the conversion higher or make the number of errors smaller. And then do the research. Try to do it informally at the beginning to minimize the costs. If you don't feel confident enough, talk to your fellow researcher, find someone who has experience, and ask for help with creating the user scenarios, the research scenarios, and maybe get some tips for conducting the research as well. Invite your teammates to be observers. Don't do the research on your own. And also invite them to do the recommendations. It's very important. As I've shown you before, watching users, observing users perform their tasks, it works miracles. And if you do the research on your own and you make the recommendations for the design on your own, then it looks as if you're trying to force your own ideas, and the research is just a smokescreen. So always, invite everyone on the team to talk about the recommendations. And once you have the results, show them to anyone interested. Or even, show them to anyone, even if they're not interested. But make it into a nice poster, create some nice graphs, use photos from the research, use nice quotes. I mean, people always provide fabulous quotes. They are either funny or profound. Make some chart, use colors, and make it into a poster. And put it in a place where, people go for a coffee break. It may be a kitchen, or it may be a lounge room. Some place where people spend their spare time. They're having their coffee, pretty bored. They don't want to get back to work. And they see this nice-looking picture on the wall. And they just start reading. And this is how you start the inception in the company. And what also works great, especially with managers and product owners, is, of course, the numbers. So try to make an estimation. I mean, very often you don't have the actual data, what change, how much money the change in the design brings you, but you can always make some kind of assumptions and estimations using, of course, the research. Try to make these estimations and show it to the managers. Okay. Well, I'm fully aware that my presentation isn't enough for you if you want to start with the research and you haven't had the pleasure yet. But what I hope for is that I manage at least to show you the benefits and to motivate you to do the research and try to give you some tips to use in your own company and to make it happen. My goal was to show you how to make data-informed decisions in order to make them better decisions as well. So if you have any questions, I'm here for you. You already have some practice in raising hands, so don't be shy.
Okay, thank you for the great talk. I have one question. How many times were you wrong after doing research, that you thought that something was completely user-friendly and it turned out that users don't love it, or the other way around?
Actually, you know what? Every time, it's mostly in usability testing, not in the discovery research, because then you don't really have any hypothesis. But when we did usability testing, there never was even once a research that wasn't surprising for me. There was always at least one thing that was completely surprising for me. And I'm an experienced designer. I've been designing for at least 10 years, you know. I love this thing and I do it every day. But there's always something that is surprising. Sometimes it may be because of the target group that is different. I remember one situation when actually I was wrong in many ways, that I was certain, because of the target group that had completely different needs than I thought they would have. They were actually graphic designers, so you know, graphic designers are different. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit humbling experience for a designer when he sees his own design being tested, and it turns out that the solutions he really liked, they don't work. But it's also the best source of improvement you can get. I mean, you cannot improve as a designer if you don't know what in your designs do or doesn't work. Okay, any other questions?
Just a short question. What's your favorite, I don't know, technique to research, do research? Your personal favorite?
I like doing workshops. So anything that requires users, you know, I like doing, for example, design studio or, you know, creating customer journey map with users. Something that gets people involved in the process. It's not just talking, but it's also doing. And I find that these methods, they provide you with more data, because when people actually have to do something, you know, more ideas come to their minds. And when they interact with other people, there's also more ideas that show up. But also observations, probably. You know, as I've said in my talk, the biggest source of information for designers, it's not what people say, it's what they do. Very often, I mean, I've seen it many times at the usability testing, when they are asked a question, how did you like the design, was it okay? And they answer, yeah, it was great, I loved it, it's perfect. And you see it, you know, you've been watching him doing the tasks, and he made so many mistakes. He didn't finish half of the tasks, and there were so many things wrong with the design. And you know, he just, okay, that was fine. Because, yeah, so observations are always more important. Any other questions?
Hi, very inspiring talk. I have a question about eye tracking. What's your opinion about this method in usability studies?
Eye tracking.
Yep.
Okay, I'm wondering whether I should be diplomatic or not. I think they're pointless in like 95% of cases. It's a waste of money. I strongly believe that in most cases you don't need to, because I don't know if you know that, but eye tracking is one of the most expensive research methods you have, and also one of the most difficult to perform. Many people that do eye tracking should not be allowed to do it. They do it wrong. And in most cases, you don't really need to, you don't really need to see what people are looking at. Or you can, you know, you can see it just with your own eyes. You don't need eye tracking device for that. And I think that there's no justification for that amount of money for the research. It's better to do more other research methods, you know, to do more research than to do eye tracking. Of course, not in all situations. There are situations when eye tracking makes sense, and if you've used any other research method and you still have money and time, then go for it. Why not? But there are many different and better tools that can provide you with the same data and with the same conclusions. And they are cheaper.
Thank you for the honest answer.
Okay, I'll be around for the break as well. So if you have some questions, anything, then you can always come and talk to me. as well, or I'm on Twitter. Okay, so thank you.